With ABC News Nightline, and the team has been in Seoul, South Korea, for the last couple of weeks, getting a up close look at the peninsula as the world pays attention to the Olympics coming up. Good morning, Juju Chang.
Good morning, McGraw. How are you?
We're doing good. So tell us what's going on. What are you finding out in Seoul, South Korea?
Well, there's all sorts of, excitement and skepticism surrounding the inter-Korean talks. So there was a surprise coming out of those meetings between North and South Korea when they said they're going to jointly field a women's ice hockey team between North Korea and South Korea, which came as a surprise in South Korea, and there was a lot of protests launched. There are those in the government who give some credit to President Trump's escalating rhetoric. They feel that brought him to the table. And yet, on the same token, there are those like former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon who says, we need to trust but verify. We need to move forward with caution because we've been betrayed and disappointed before.
How much is because we hear it, the rhetoric, we're half the world away, but how real is the threat of nuclear war to the people in Korea?
Well, the real game changer, as you know, McGraw, is the fact that North Korea in the recent years has become a credible nuclear threat. That's new. That wasn't the case for 70 years. So you might call it the boy who cried wolf syndrome because they've been, making all these threats for so many years. But that's a real game changer. In addition to that, it's clear that ICBM technology, that their claims are that an intercontinental ballistic missile could reach perhaps Guam or even the continental United States, which has a lot of analysts worried and really thinking about what is the best way to restrain this sort of rogue nation in the form of North Korea. And there are those here in South Korea who feel that as long as you keep them engaged in diplomacy and dialogue, perhaps you reintroduce nuclear weapons inspectors into the region, that's the only way to contain this menace.
The rank and file Koreans, the ones that are busy working and playing and living, are they digging ditches? Are they building bunkers? What are they doing?
There are a few, and when I say a few, it's a vast majority of South Koreans are convinced that there is no such possibility of a nuclear conflict. And I think part of that is because this, sort of boy who cried wolf syndrome, where you start to not believe these empty threats any longer. But there's also a pretty shrewd arms control analysis, which is referred to as mutually assured destruction. They understand that if Kim Jong-un pushes the nuclear option, it's an act of suicide. That essentially, there are 35,000 American troops and tons of artillery here, and that would essentially wipe the regime off the map. But in so doing, it would assure death and destruction reigning on South Korea as well, and nobody wants that. And so this sort of tense peace that has been underway here in South Korea is only going to continue in that fashion. But with the world's eyes turned towards South Korea and Pyeongchang during the Winter Olympics, there's a real sense of optimism and at least hope tethered by skepticism that perhaps progress could be made.
With all this attention on this joint team that's going to perform in the Olympics, anybody worried about defectors from North Korea and or word getting back to the people in North Korea about the outside world?
I've spent a lot of time in the last week in the defector community, and there's always a fear that defectors will come across, and I think more so across the northern border, because as many as 30,000 North Koreans are vulnerable to human trafficking because there's so much desperation and deprivation across that. But high-profile defectors, like that North Korean soldier who came across Panmunjom and was shot at and shot down, those kinds of high-level defectors, they run the risk of having their entire families back home not just arrested, but tortured and often killed simply because their relative defected. So it's the kind of tension and fear that North Korean defectors communities here in South Korea are watching with bated breath.
Juju Chang live in Seoul, South Korea. More on Nightline all week?
Yes, well, we're going to file packages when we get back home. Right now, we're headed home, but we've had an incredibly interesting week of reporting while we've been here.
We'll look forward to it on Nightline. Have a safe trip home. Thanks.